He said that people with Dragonflies, Dragonflies.
All right, everybody. Thank you for coming. Just so that everybody knows everybody, we just go around the room and just say the name, and so people can be in a first name basis here. So Max, up to start.
I'm Max McPhee. I'm a member of the board, and I've been doing Dragonfly expeditions with Dave since 2002. I think.
Yeah. Mary?
Mary Holtorp, I'm a resident of Athol and I make stained glass dragonflies.
There you go.
I'm Nancy Lowe. I don't know any of you. I just moved here a year ago. I'm an art science person. I live in Peterson.
Yeah.
Linda Hoffman, we live in Sterling. We're kind of new members.
I'm George Hoffman. We became members just last year and really glad we found this group.
Bob Mallon, I'm from Athol, a longtime member.
Very cool.
Hi, Rachel Barons, I'm from Athol, and I love learning about nature, and I'm a member.
Bob Wash, board member and just general.
He's the keeper of the place. So, he's undeniable. So anyway, happy to be here. If somebody else will try to talk to me, they'll have to wait. So anyway, so Dragonflies, this has been a really good experience to me. We come back, we've been doing this a little while now. And I'm gonna see if I can get my machine to work, which is always a pleasure to see if we can get it to function.
You're recording?
I am recording. So if you go back in history of the club, none of us have changed that much. There I am in the middle. This is probably in the early 1960s with the group. And it's amazing that Sylvia's still a member and Peter Murphy lives down the street and Nancy out in Chicago. But she's a librarian. But anyway, so the group hasn't changed all that much. And then we are just a few years ago, still going at it. And there's Bobby in the picture, and these guys pretty much all graduated. We all went to high school together and we're still birding, which is kind of a great thing. I do have to acknowledge one of my dear friends who passed away a couple of years ago, Littlefield. He and I spent a great deal of time dragonflying together and butterflying, and she knew her botany also, which was very helpful because she would tell us what that butterfly landed on, or whatever. But she was always ready to go on a field trip. So whenever I needed someone to go poke at something or go look for something, she was always available. So I really miss her. And she was a board member and a very active member of the club. So, big thing about dragonflies and dragonflies is that they're actually exquisite animals. If you look at them really closely, there's no question, they're just plain beautiful. And most of my work with these guys was really, I've done most of mine catching them and looking at them in the hand. As that's the way I was taught 25 years ago. So I'm learning. This is one of my photographs. It's actually in focus. That's a rare event. But it actually, with the camera equipment today, things are changing. So we're able to see a lot better and identify things much more simply. But dragonflies go back a long way. There's quite a fossil record of dragonflies. Some of these things were 18 inches to 2 foot wingspans. And when you think about the dinosaurs that are flying around now, they were like a 6-inch wingspan. That's pretty serious stuff. And they are in the fossil record. And it's really interesting. So kind of the history of dragonflying in Massachusetts. In 91, Virginia Carpenter, who's now Virginia Brown, did the first regional guide, the field guide to damselflies at Cape Cod. And it probably only had half the species that were available at the time, but there was no guide available. And what we used all the time were these handy little field guides like this. That, you know, you need a Sherpa to kind of help you to get around. But this is what we used. And a lot of the stuff that I learned, I came back and taught some classes, and we wound up learning together, you know, how we reinforced all of that. So, in 1999, I went up to the Humboldt Institute with my good friend Gail Howe, who was working at Brockman Brook in Worcester at the time. And Gail and I, we had just had a wonderful week of just intensive dragon flying. You know, it was, you're out in the field all day long, you come back, you have your supper, back in the classroom for some lectures. You know, prepping the specimens that we got that day, learned how to mount them, learned how to identify them. And again, those big books are what we had to deal with. So then after we came back from that, we decided the best way for us to learn how to do it was to teach it. So we wound up doing some Dragonfly Institutes that we held both here and at Broadmeadow Brook in Worcester. And we had quite a few people join us in the exploit. And here we are up at Tully Dam. And again, we learned together. One of the books we're looking at is one of the early guides to dragonflies and damselflies of Wisconsin. And one of the interesting things that's been used now in other books is they actually have little bars that tell you how big the animal is. And which is very, very useful. We happen to have it in your hand. And again, the bars are both in metric and English. But these little black lines tell you how big the bug is, which is very useful. And if you see in some of my slides, I'll show later. In all those early days with captain, I had calipers, and I would measure the wing length, and measure the total length, and I'd measure the abdomen length. And that would help you differentiate various species that were close. These are some of the guides now that have come out in the interim. I have a couple of them up here. The Damselfly and Dragonfly Massachusetts guide is available from Mass Wildlife. And that's still about $20. And that was written by several good friends of mine. And then the big one that's on the table is Ed Lamb's Damselflies of the Northeast. And E.O. Wilson said that this publication was one of the best examples of scientific illustration that E.O. Wilson has come across. And he's a really good arbiter of that kind of stuff. So, so anyway, and the big news about that, well, part of this is what it looks like on the inside. Really great pictures of damselflies up close. And we're about to be given a new book. This will be coming out in October. This is The Dragonflies of North America by Ed Lamb. He's been more than a decade in the works. If I say it's more than a decade, it's probably two. Because he was, I've been in the field with Ed numerous times in Texas and Georgia and Oregon and different places, and he's been working on the book the whole time. But he also says he hated to draw dragonfly's legs. But this is what it looks like. This is from the Amazon thing. It's available for pre-order, but it will be out for publication distribution in October. So we're looking forward to this book. And it covers the whole North America. I've used nets for the most part. I was trained using nets. There's lots of different varieties of nets. this is my main net, you know, it's collateral, this is around a $200 net. But, you know, I think all those guys with golf bags have $200 clubs and lots of them. And this is a lot more useful. I played golf and didn't find it very useful at all. And then, you know, these are kind of cool. This is actually one that folds up and you can put it in your knapsack and it comes apart, you know, so that, you know, you can really take it on your hike or whatever you're going. So,
That's the kind that I have.
yeah, these are really good. Unfortunately, BioQuick was the one where I got is out of business. And we haven't got good replacements yet for BioQuick, but there's several companies that are actually working to fill that void. And hopefully they'll get there.
Do you have recommendations for that, like forestry supplies one, but I don't know, where are you getting entomology equipment now?
Yeah, there's Rose Entomology is the one that has the expensive one. And she may also now have some other versions of this, but Rose Entomology is one. But you know, there's nobody taking the lead, like BioQuick had the market, you know, sold up, they had everything from, you know, this stuff, and collecting equipment and files and, you know, anything you might, you know, Cornell drawers and
Yeah.
whatever. So the only thing with netting, we try not to capture teneral dragonflies. Now, you can tell a dragonfly is teneral, like this one we're looking at, because the wings are really shiny. And they haven't hardened off yet. So we try to avoid the really reflective, shiny wing dragonflies. Number one, their color isn't usually developed yet. The pigmentation in that, you know, is I'll talk a little bit more about that after, but the colors haven't developed yet. And this one actually, I never did really identify this dragonfly. You know, we have the exuvier in this. I gotta find it again, because now we have resources to help us. But it's probably, it's one of the club tails, and it's one of the stream club tails. And this was taken at out of the Swift River in Peterstown. But again, we didn't net it, we just picked it up and very gently held it, so we didn't damage the wings.
Dave, what is that green, that yellow at the rear legs at the hip? That mites?
Oh, right, you know, right at the base of the thing, is that mites, or is that? No, I think those are glands, actually. Yeah, I think that's he's still developing. You know, they're pushing out the liquid. You know, as they blow themselves up. You know, and I'll show pictures of that in a bit. This is what it should look like out in the Mills River right out here. This is from a few years ago. You know, the water should be knee deep or less in order to wade out here. I was out there this week and it's probably chest deep or better. So wading isn't a good idea right now. But there's nothing finer than a hot summer afternoon wading around in nice water with some great dragonflies, and it just nice stuff to do.
It looks super fun, like that picture just captures so much positive energy.
Yeah, no, it's just fun. I mean, it's just, you're there and you're looking, you know, we have people looking up, down, sideways, there's plant people and there's bird people and there's, you know. So let's talk a little bit about the life history of the dragonfly and its different forms. So when we think about dragonfly baiting, we often talk about them in the wheel. And it's where the male and female are hooked together, and then the female is receiving the sperm from the male. And looking at it from the side, and this is true of both dragonflies and damselflies, the male is on top and he's holding the female by the back of the neck, and then she uses her ovipositor to come up underneath the male and grab the sperm from his secondary sexual appendages. His actual sperm comes from the tail, the anal appendages on the abdomen, and You can see it there, you know, come from here, but he has to load this secondary appendages up here at the second abdominal appendage so that the female can receive them. It looks rather, not very much fun for the female. But anyway, this is their methodology, and this is an ancient thing. I mean, they've been doing this way for a very long time. And the I'm gonna say the whole thing, the speciation that was done a long time ago really focused on those sexual appendages, and that male anal appendage fits the back of the female's neck like a lock and a key. You know what I mean? You know, so a male of a different species is not gonna be able to join in the same manner. So, so that's what we learned about tell the different species by looking at those anal appendages. So, once the female has the sperm, there's a couple of ways that they actually go about laying their eggs. One of them would be endophytic, which means they actually lay their egg within a plant, and the females of the damselflies and most of the darners have like what might be like a little can opener kind of appendage on the female's terminal appendage, and she slices into the vegetation, laying an egg in the vegetation, which protects the egg from predators. So that egg is, you know, she doesn't use as many eggs because it takes longer to lay them, and they're individually laid, and she does that over water. So even you know, sometimes it'll be in a plant that's overhanging the water, or on the case of darners, sometimes it'll even be a rotten tree stump that's over the water or a branch, and they'll lay that egg so that when the larva hatches, it drops into the water, and it gives them a little bit of a heads up on the predators. The other main method is all the skimmers, and many of the others are exophytic, which means that they actually lay their eggs in big clumps. And this is an amber wing, and you see that big pocket of eggs that's on the abdomen, and she'll flick that abdomen onto the surface of the water, dispersing hundreds and hundreds of eggs at a time. And that gives her an advantage of having thousands of eggs to have them, at least some of them, come to maturity. And one of the more interesting ones is this group, the spiketails. And they have an appendage on the back that's like a real spike. And they turn that abdominal appendage 90 degrees and actually poke it into the mud and drop their eggs into the mud. And you know, in an aquatic setting, so that those eggs hatch and they're already in muddy, wet situation. And again, the fish can't get at them. So those are the kind of you know, the three major methods of egg deposition. This is right out here in the Millers. These are powdered damsels. I was saying earlier that this group of damselflies is not a very good indicator of clean water, but they're pretty abundant. And again, this is right here in the Millers. This is a grape leaf floating on the water, and all those females are ovipositing their eggs into the leaf, and the males are hanging on to the back of their necks and just kind of laying up in the middle of the air. And I've got several pictures in my collection of, you just see the abdomen of the male still there, and the body and the head are gone because some bird came by and clipped them. And but the female doesn't care, and she just continues to lay her eggs and keep going. So, but it's interesting, and again, they can be very prolific and a lot, you know, producing a lot of eggs in some of these situations. So once all the eggs have been laid and all that, and the larva and the eggs hatch into larvae, these larvae are very interesting in their own right, and depending on the species, they could live in this stage, in this aquatic stage, for a couple of weeks to several years in this aquatic state. And depending on the species, again, And the climatic conditions on some of these, like the common green darner, if the weather conditions are not suitable for it to emerge, it can just hang out in the water for another year. And just, stay as a larva, so they have some flexibility. And actually, it's interesting that on common green darners, from the same pool, some of these can grow and come out as adults and actually just stay within the area. And others from the same population can migrate all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico and into South America. And I know when Shelley was working down after Katrina, she wound up with on the beaches there and on the Gulf of Mexico, and huge swarms of common green darners were held up on the shore of the Gulf of Mexico, waiting for the weather to change, so they could all migrate across into Central America. So interesting stuff and a lot of variation. I'll talk a little bit about the wandering glider, which has a short lifespan as an aquatic state, and they actually also migrate. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a picture I took again right here in the Mills River this time of year. This is the Illinois River Cruiser. If you notice on this larva how long the legs are, and these guys could go a couple 100 yards from the water, and I find them up 10 to 15 feet up in a tree to pupate, to go into the next phase, to emerge. And but these real long legged are pretty typical of this family of the cruisers. So for the most part, and this is a series from the rusty snaketail. My friend Tom Murray and I were watching these over in Orange, just across from the old Drum restaurant where the Pretzel is down there in the river. And we got to watch this rusty snaketail emerge. And as it comes out of the water, that looks very much like it's nymph form. And then it starts to break open in the back and pull itself out. And it does so over the course of a couple of hours. And it kind of keeps going. You look at the face only a mother can love, huh? And then it finally gets itself out and it starts to blow itself up, but it pumps fluid through the whole system. Works itself out. And eventually it gets to a point where it's getting almost ready to fly. You see the little white tubes here, these little filaments, these are the tracheal tubes that would have been, it went from being having gills to having lungs. So this is the transitional period for it. And again, it's just going to blow itself up. And then it'll sit out there for a little while. Morning. And what's interesting about these guys, so it'll spend, the next few hours just getting itself hardened off, so that's so it can fly. And there she is, she's just about ready to go now. And actually, these guys, right after this period, spend the next several weeks up in the treetops and don't come down at all. So you don't see them after this point for several weeks until they actually go and do their baiting stuff, which is their ectophytic, and they'll come down and come down to the river and tap their abdomen onto the river, releasing their eggs. And I know I was in this very spot watching these guys come down, and I was trying to catch one, and the trout got 3 before I got 1. And so for a pretty precarious time as they're tapping the water, the trout are very interested in that behavior, and are very apt to want to eat them at that point. So it's good. So one of the pitfalls of all of this stuff, if they don't get themselves out of the water enough, we've had issues down the Connecticut River where boats going by would have big waves. And some of the riprap that they put down near the bridges would only allow the dragonfly larvae to come up a foot or so out of the water. And it would get to the top of that particular stone and stop. Well, a boat would go by and wash over that and would damage the wings. And this dragonfly is done for. I mean, it's never gonna fix itself. So there was some good work done by some of our friends, Fred Morrison and others that work with the pump storage facility people there in Northfield, and actually redesigned some of the riprap on those bridge bottoms. So these dragonflies, as they come up, they get higher up on the bank and away from the wave action. And this was actually able to be minimized. So now that they're out of the water, these skins are left behind, which we call exuvia. And really, they're just another whole thing. These are being used by spiders as little houses and stuff, and we can actually identify all of these now 2 species. And you know, if you have some good, time in the restroom to study, this whole book is just on the exuvia and how to identify them. And there's a friend of mine, Ken Tennyson, that wrote this book, and he spent several decades trying to figure this out, and did all the line drawing and stuff, and there's a lot that can be learned about our water quality. Quite a bit can be learned about the whole idea of distribution. I mean, once dragonflies leave and have wings, they can be far away from whatever water source they used at the beginning. So to actually live in. And so there's much to be learned yet, but these guys can help us tell a lot about the health of particular water bodies and also distribution of where some of these things have come from. I know it's in Virginia, and there was a group of snake tails there, that the only population that had been known previously was in Wisconsin. And then there they were in the James River in Virginia, and nobody had found an adult flying around. And we found the skins, and we found them emerging. But once they've emerged, like I said before, a lot of times they go up with the canopy, you don't see them again. Well, the theory now is that these guys actually started way upstream, and maybe one of the tributaries. And as they matured, go to different instars, these larvae would float down to the next level, and eventually, when they got down to the big James River, it would actually emerge. And the adults take back off and go back upstream to lay their eggs again. So that's the current theory, and it was supported by netting in the river at night and catching the floating larvae coming down the river. And so they kind of, but like I said, there's tons of things to learn yet about all this stuff. So here's a lily pad clubtail over here at Tully Pond. You can see its larval skin here. It just emerged, and again, you can see the very distinctive shape of this exuvia. You see the long abdomen here, so very distinctive. And again, these are the things we're learning now, and Ken's book is really helping us to learn some of that. Yeah, Matt.
Are they waiting for sunny days to emerge, or will they do it overcast or?
Not raining, and the sunnier the better. And I've actually seen them pause if the sun goes by a cloud, they kind of like stop emerging and kind of hang in there until the sun. I think it helps to warm them up. Of course, they're cold-blooded animals anyway, but I think it does make a difference if the sun is actually shining. Again, I just mentioned Ken's book. It's not for the faint of heart. It's I think it's listed for like $250 or something, but I got it on sale. But anyway, so let's talk about what the different families and groups we have here in Massachusetts, and we're pretty fortunate, there's about 140 to 50 species of dragonflies and damselflies here in Massachusetts, which oddly enough is about the same as they have in California. And you think how much bigger California is than Massachusetts, and we just have such a rich diversity of habitat and aquatic habitats that damselflies and dragonflies use. And again, they need to have fresh water and for their larvae to develop. So we'll start it off. So here's just some of the characteristics, go through this kind of quick to learn some of the terminology. You know, basically, you have your head, your thorax, and your abdomen. There's your head, there's the thorax, a big part. And then your abdomen starts here at one. The first segment is fused, so it's not flexible. And then section 2 has the hamules, which I'll show you pictures of later, but that's that secondary male appendage on the males. Which I've used, if you see the older book, the big thick book, really good pictures of the hamules, which are really distinctive things. So if you have a question, if you have it in your hand with a male, you really can identify it easily to species. Then your terminal appendages, you know, there's 10 segments, then your upper superior and inferior appendages. So let's start. This is the broad-winged damselflies, and this is how they're sorted out in most of your books. And this is the American ruby spot, which was one of our big ones right here. The ebony jewel wings, these are just going by now. This is one of those ones that once they're done mating, I've seen the females right here at the front steps of the center here, and the males start the females start to look like males. So the other males won't bother them, you know. So this is one of the classic examples of a species that really takes that to heart. A similar one is the river jewel wing. The ebony jewel wing is usually in dappled sunlight. We have kind of like a shaded screen. The river jewel wing would be an open screen, but has a lot more sunlight and emergent vegetation. There's a ruby spot. This one was actually in the Connecticut River, taken from a kayak. So the spread-winged damselflies, again, different between damselflies and dragonflies. Damselflies have their wings over their head at rest. Dragonflies hold their wings out horizontally at rest. And then there's the exception. The spread-winged damselflies hold them out at a 45-degree angle, just to make sure you're not confused. But they're gorgeous, you know, and this is a emerald spread-wing. The narrow-winged dragonfly, damselflies, some of the more abundant species, all the dancers, the fluids, and the fork-tailed sprites. This is an aurora damsel. These come out early spring, and it has a very nice yellow patch at the base of the thorax, which makes it for a nice, easy identification. Plus, their wings are really long too, come almost all the way out to the end of the abdomen. But they're pretty cool, and they're early season. They're out here in May. Probably one of our most common is the eastern forktail, Fishnura verticalis. Nice, strong dorsal stripe. Notice the eyes on a damselfly are separated. You know, and that will come into play when we look at dragonflies. Notice the wings are shorter than the aurora would have been. Here's one of the many blue type damselflies. This happens to be a double stripe. If you look at the thorax, you got a heavy blue stripe and then a thin blue stripe. You know, this is a double stripe. Damselfly. My friend Michael Tracy took this one. The photographs in focus are usually not mine. So, but I have a lot of good friends that willingly share their photos with us. So when you look at all of the different guides, the damselflies, this is what we used to see. And each looking at each one of these abdominal appendages on damselflies gave us the speciation. So I have a very hard time trying to remember which ones have the more blue stripes or black stripes on the abdomen. When if I could just look at the terminal appendage, they really come very clear very quickly. And again, each one of these appendages is very specific to the species, because the male and female have to hook, lock and key together for them to mate. So, but anyway, so there's, they give you some idea of some of the color variations in the damselflies. And we have most of these around here. Okay, so we'll go through some of the darners. This is the female common green that you're looking at there. And this is what I'm saying about the eyes. Now, in the different families, the clubtails have their eyes apart. You know what I mean? So if you see a dragonfly and it has like the same look as the damselfly with the eyes apart, it's going to be in the clubtail family. And that helps you narrow it down. If they come together at a specific point, it would be in the spike-tailed group. And if the eyes come together in a scene, it's the rest of it. So you gotta go a little deeper. But you can get rid of two groups really quickly just by looking at the eyes to help you sort through them a little bit. So the clubtails have the eyes apart, and the spike-tails have the eyes coming together at a point, and the rest have their eyes coming together in a scene. So here's a Canada darner. This is one of the ones you might find out there this evening. It has a deep notch on the thoracic pattern. All the darners, one of the best ways to tell them apart is to actually get a look at this side view of the thorax. These are very distinctive and quite helpful. If you look real close again, I'm used to holding them in my hand. To see the serrations on the tip is one of the ways to tell it from the green stripe darner. And now my friends better than I can tell them apart by just looking. I'm not there yet. I gotta look closer. But anyway, they're great stuff. So here's an example of the different patterns. And you can see they're all quite different and unique to each species. So, and we can have, I know several years ago, we were up in Tully and one of those dragonfly swarms, and I think we had 8 or 10 species of darner within that swarm that we caught that night. So they're not all the same. And this is just, a bottle darner sitting on a tree, and they really blend in so well with their surroundings. Yeah, so as mentioned, this is that little least clubtail on the railing of our house. And this is a species that's in fast moving water and usually in shallow, rocky, bouldery, not bouldery, but pebbly kind of areas. And we don't have any of that habitat in our backyard. So who knows? But anyway, so again, its eyes are apart. This is a lancet clubtail, another clubtail. We're looking at their eyes are apart. The lancet clubtail is probably the most abundant of the clubtails that you'll find. It's relatively small. They changed their name to Phaenagonthus, I believe, just to confuse me, but they do that. The largest dragonfly that we have handily is the dragon hunter. Again, brevostylus. These guys are big. They hunt other dragonflies. Its exuvia and larva are quite unique in that it's very flat. And they are actually back themselves in the sand. And as the current of a river goes by, there's actually a little millimeter of space at the interface between the sand and the water that the current doesn't affect. It's like there's just a little space there, and that's where it hangs out, in that little space. And then as things float by, it throws out its labium and draws them in. And they can, the voracious hunters, all the dragonfly larvae are, And, so these are usually found in larger rivers and also in lakes. They'll be in lakes, and again, that tidal action on lakes is where they're in that little zone,
Got one right across
right, yeah.
there like 2 years ago. And
Yeah.
I think also up at Eagle Reserve like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I've had them there, and, again, I've had them, most all the rivers here will have them. And, I've had them, I've been sitting there waiting for dragonflies to come by, and I've had them come and land on my shoulder and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're too close, you can't catch them. But anyway, cool stuff. So again, we were talking about, different, club tails. This is the rusty snaketail. Max had one recently. But this is what I'm talking about, ham mules in the center picture. Very distinctive appendages. And if you have it in your hand, and now with your phone, it makes it really easy, you know, because they don't have to carry as much equipment. And, it really is very distinctive. And again, back in, this is 2003. I was taking all the measurements, the length, the abdominal, and the hind wing, you know, so. And when I do my, I have a collection also of some of these from back in those days, and now that is on my identification card, you know, it tells you it's specific. But nowadays, I can use binoculars and tell these guys, you know, the big green, you know, thorax, and this very distinctive patterning on the abdomen. You could really see that with binoculars. So, all right, so now we're going to spike tails, yes. This one was on the endangered list, it's now, I think it's been downgraded a bit, but this was up at, Ricefield Pond. Again, back a while ago, and, it's a beautiful big dragonfly. And, I've only seen a few of these around. This one is kind of interesting. This is another spike tail, and this is a tiger spike tail that's actually for the mid-Atlantic states, and has been progressively moving northward over the last few years. And they actually set up shop in Amherst. And this is some of the records for this species. And you see the arrow with the new record in Amherst showed up, but they're up in the upper Connecticut River Valley, and in the what's that? Who's the dog? What's
That's Lake George.
yeah. But anyway, that, you know, the other big river system that goes to New York,
Hudson.
the Hudson River Valley. Yep. So, all right, so, another subgroup of these guys are the river cruisers. Remember I mentioned the long-legged cruiser that climbs up a long distance away from the bank and up into a tree to navigate. These have a single racing stripe down the side, which differentiate from a lot of the others. You know, these, most often I see them cruising up and down the middle of the river. And they have that big bright yellow spot on the back of the abdomen on the end. And with binoculars, it looks like a little lantern or something on the back of the tail. So they're really pretty easy to identify, even with binoculars, as they cruise up and down. I actually was able to catch one. This is back in 2001. I was much more agile then. And again, you know, this is when I did all the measurements of the hind wing and abdomens and all that, but really a pretty neat species that we get. So the emeralds are a whole group, and some of them are pretty, what some of our Odinate friends really like is that as the big game hunting of the group. These some of them are pretty easy to find, like these two that we're seeing, the emerald and the racket tailed and the clamp tip. But some of them are really difficult to catch. They come out at dusk, they fly pretty high, oftentimes with the darners, but and they love bogs and other really places that are very hard for people to walk around on. So here's a clamp tip emerald. You see the big C-shaped anal appendage, very easy to identify the males. you can't think that's very comfortable for the female, but there it is. And again, the emeralds are called emeralds because of the green eyes and the green parts of their body that show through. There's another one, the ski-tipped emerald. Again, you can see where it gets its name from the shape of that anal appendage. And I gotta find another one of these. They're at the listed species, and I haven't found one since 2004. And I need to look harder, but because they're only good in heritage for 25 years. So it's, you know, we gotta keep updating. We gotta keep updating these records, so we keep going. I'll talk more about that as we go. So the really easy ones for everybody are the different skimmers. And this is a 12 spot to looking at. And these are probably the more abundant ones that we recognize in the summertime. They're, you know, if you're out by your dock or whatever, they tend to act like fly catchers. They tend to sit on a perch, they'll fly, catch something, go back to the same perch. Great for photography. You know, you're focused on the branch where they were landing, you know, quite often they'll come back. So any of the ones in focus that I've done have usually been these guys. This is the spangled skimmer, and this is the only one that we have with a two-tone stigma. I was gonna get it. That's a two-tone stigma, black and white. And they look very much like the slaty skimmer, except for the stigmas. And the coloration on these guys is actually a waxy coating, and we call it pruinosity. And it comes from a prune or whatever. When you look at a plum or whatever, and it turns milky white, and you get that kind of a waxy coating on a plum, it's named after that. It's not quite the same thing, but that's where the terminology comes from. And these develop as the insect develops. So this will start off as brown and yellow perhaps, and then turn blue as it matures. Just love these guys. Some of these wing patterns and some of these skimmers are just wonderful. I've had these at Lake Hunter and a couple other places in the area. Just gorgeous. And again, they like to perch. Probably the most ubiquitous of all of our dragonflies is this, the blue dasher. It's Pachydiplax. It's in every little backyard pond or whatever around. They tend to want to perch with the wings slightly forward. Very distinctive blue pattern with a black tip on the abdomen. Not very big and quite common. So one of the other interesting ones that we have, these fairly commonly in our bog areas, are the smallest of our dragonflies, and this is the elfin skimmer, Nanothemis bella. And I found these all around our area where we have bogs. And that's the female that looks like a bee. And again, they're very small, they're like a damselfly. And the male has blue pruinosity. He starts off with a kind of a black and yellow pattern, then he turns with this beautiful blue pruinosity. But they're tiny. I mean, they're not very big at all. So I mentioned that some things actually migrate, and probably the biggest star of any of that is the wandering glider. And this family, if you look at the wing, you can see how broad this wing is. And we've been out on whale watch boats and have these things land on a ship out at sea. And this one was down at gate 35, but I've seen them all around here. And these are part of the rain pool gliders. And their larval form only lasts for a week or two. Then they emerge into their, the egg larva. It takes no time at all for them to go through that process. Then they're off flying around. They're not very smart. I've seen them trying to lay eggs in the handicap parking spots down here, and I've seen them on car hoods, you know, seeing the reflection of the hood, so, but they'll lay eggs in fountains and bird baths and whatever, so they can take advantage of very ephemeral wetland conditions. And they have probably the biggest migration that we know so far of any of our insects. And this is a botanist that was out in the Maldives, noticed these swarms of dragonflies. And apparently on Maldives, there are no exposed fresh water at all on the whole island. And so they couldn't have come from there. So after a lot of research, they figured out that they actually start in August out in southern India, go across to Africa, and then return back in December. So there's a great TED Talk about this. So if you look at dragonfly migrations on Google, you can find the TED Talk. Really quite interesting. And so even botanists can find cool stuff about dragonflies. So just a little bit about, you know, the endangered species. This is the rare ringed bog hunter on my head. It was funny, we were at the Oxbow National Wildlife Refuge, and we walked out and all these trails and stuff looking for this insect. We're almost back, you can see my car, and then this thing comes out of nowhere and lands on the side of my face. You know, and everybody else had a great look at it. I did not. But we do encourage you to, if you have sightings of dragonflies, to include them on iNaturalist. Also, the Mass Wildlife Heritage Hub, we have several species that do need updating in their listing, particularly here in Central Mass, since we haven't done as much of it in the last decade as we did the previous decade. So it's all good. These are the listed species that we have in Massachusetts. So there is quite a few things here that we might be able to locate nearby, and we have pretty much. So we have one specialty here in Central Mass that we're in the southern part of its range. It's much more common in Hampshire, Maine, and further north. This is the ebony bog hunter, and it's one of my favorites. We've been able to locate it in lots of places locally. And if you look at the map, this is its distribution in Massachusetts. So we're right there. I mean, it's odd that I don't know of a good suitable habitat in Orange or Phillipston yet, or Gardner. And they should be in all three of those areas. And I know that the Winchington and Templeton species are again getting at the age of, you know, they're like 2001 or 2003 or something that they were last observed. But we have our own unique endangered species. And you know, an Althal right here, the South Althal Conservation Area, you know, has a population, and the Eagle Reserve in Royalston has a population that we've been able to verify in the last few years. So here's my root spot. So if it was a nice sunny dry day and the river wasn't high as it is, these are some of the things you would see locally right here. This is the American ruby spot, Catarina americana, and these are just beautiful. The males do some really interesting courtships with the female. You know, they actually hover around the female and do this whole dance. They're really just wonderful to watch. And on a nice day down here by the Bridge Park, by the bridge, you can actually see these guys in action. When I did the survey I did a statewide survey for these guys back, I don't know, 2010 or something. The most individuals of this species I found are right here. Between the Tully confluence, which is right up here to the bridge, I had 354 American ruby spots. So this is one of our species. The arrow clubtail is another one that's a late season. You know, a lot of these were thought to be endangered because they didn't have a lot of records. Well, they don't fly till August. So a lot of the ornithologists are really done looking at stuff in, by July. The big season is June. And so these kind of escape detection. So again, these were once listed, now they're not. And we have them right here in the Mills River. Nice and handy. And again, you're looking at these, and that last appendage is like 1.5 times the length of the one before it. So number 10 is 1.5 times the length of number 9. But and they're just gorgeous. The other one is the zebra clubtail, again, right out here in the Mills River. I had my first one back in 2001 in Winchington. Again, it's back when we measured everything. And so, but these are just as good as a specimen record. If you've got photographs like this, and I cheat quite a bit with this is all done on PowerPoint. I take several pictures with my camera and then put them into a PowerPoint with the information. And Heritage is very satisfied with this format for accepting it as a record. So you don't have to capture it, kill it, curate it, and all that. You can do it all pretty much on your phone. So I just want to leave you with this, that entomology extends the limits of being in new directions, so that I walk in nature with a sense of greater space and freedom. It suggests, besides, that the universe is not rough-hewn, but perfect in its details. Nature will bear the closest inspection. She invites us to lay our eye level with the smallest leaf and take an insect view of its plane. And I want to thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
All right. Well, I'll be happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Yes,
What do we know about dragonfly migration, like especially when there are multiple species? How they, like, what's the signal or the trigger for them to come together and start a migration?
okay, so there's a bit. Dragonfly migration is a relatively new field. And a lot of it was back when